The auction hall was almost empty that night. Only a few buyers sat scattered in the shadows, their faces covered, their voices low. Dust floated in the air like old secrets, and the wooden stage creaked whenever someone walked across it. At the center of that stage stood a small alien girl, her wrists tied together with rough rope. Her skin was pale, her eyes wide with fear, and her body looked too thin, as if she had not eaten in many days. She trembled as the auctioneer pushed her forward, his booming voice echoing against the empty walls. "Lot number 99, the auctioneer shouted. A young female of unknown lineage, weak but alive. Starting bid, 10 credits, no one spoke. The silence stretched like a knife, cutting into the girl's heart. She lowered her eyes, ashamed of her own existence. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some coughing, some whispering, but no one raised a hand. 10 credits, the auctioneer repeated, his tone impatient. 10 credits for this worthless creature, anyone? A few buyers laughed, their voices cruel. One of them muttered, "She is not worth the rope around her wrists," another said. "Even 10 credits is too much," the girl heard their words, and her chest ached, her breath shallow. Tears formed in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She had learned long ago that no one cared if she cried. The auctioneer slammed his hand on the wooden table, his voice rising. 5 credits then, will anyone give 5? Still no one answered. The echo of his voice bounced off the walls, making the room feel even emptier. The girl felt her knees weaken, and she almost fell, her stomach twisted. Not from hunger, but from shame. She wondered if she would simply be thrown away like trash. In the far corner of the hall, a single figure sat quietly. It was a human, tall, broad-shouldered, his clothes plain and dusty from travel. He had been silent the whole time, watching the scene with sharp eyes. His face showed no laughter, no cruelty, only calm observation. The alien girl dared to glance at him, and for the first time she saw eyes that did not mock her. They looked at her not as an object, but as a person. The auctioneer grew desperate. 1 credit then, anyone, just 1 credit for this worthless thing, he sneered. The hall filled with mocking laughter. Some buyers shouted jokes, others clapped in false amusement. The alien girl's heart sank deeper, her head hanging low even for a single credit. No one wanted her then. A voice broke the laughter, deep and steady. "I will take her," the human said. His words carried across the hall like a stone dropped into still water. The laughter died instantly, and every head turned toward him. The auctioneer blinked in surprise, his jaw dropping. "You," he said, "you would pay for this creature? Why?" The human stood up slowly, his presence filling the silent hall. He did not speak of credits, he did not reach for money. Instead, he raised his hands and said, "I offer my freedom in exchange for hers." Gasps erupted across the hall. The buyers murmured in shock, some even standing to see if they had heard correctly. The alien girl's eyes widened, her tears forgotten for a moment. She stared at the human, unable to believe his words. Why would anyone give up their freedom for her, a worthless girl no one wanted? The auctioneer's lips twisted into a greedy smile. He could hardly believe his luck. "No credits, no coins, no gold," the auctioneer confirmed loudly. "You offer yourself? Your labor? Your life?" "Yes," the human replied, his voice firm. "Her freedom for mine." The alien girl shook her head weakly, whispering under her breath, "No. No, don't. Not for me." But her voice was too soft to reach him. The chains were already being brought forward, clinking in the hands of the guards. The human did not flinch as they wrapped the heavy iron around his wrists. He only looked at the girl once more, his eyes calm and steady. "You are not nothing," he whispered to her, before the guards pulled him away. The hall was filled with silence again, but this time, it was not cruel laughter or mocking whispers. It was shock, confusion, and a strange kind of awe. The alien girl stood frozen, her heart beating faster than ever before. For the first time in her life, someone had seen her worth. And for the first time, she was not alone. The chains locked around the human's wrists. Cold and heavy, the guards pushed him forward, dragging him down the wooden steps, but his face stayed calm, his eyes steady. He did not fight, he did not cry out. He simply accepted the weight of iron as if it was nothing. The alien girl stumbled after him, still holding the rope tied around her wrists. Her small hands shook and her legs trembled. But she could not stop following him. The guards laughed, shoving her back, but she resisted. Every step the human took, she took as well, afraid to lose sight of him. The auctioneer clapped his hands together with greedy delight. "Sold," he announced loudly. "The human has traded his freedom for the worthless girl." His voice carried into the dark corners of the hall. Where whispers grew, some laughed in disbelief. Some muttered curses and others shook their heads. "Humans are strange," one alien said, "throwing away life for nothing." Another spat on the ground. "Foolish sacrifice, meaningless." The girl's heart twisted. She had been called worthless many times before, but now the word burned deeper. This man, this stranger, had given up everything because of her, and the world around them mocked him for it. The guards led them into the streets outside, where the night air was thick with dust. The lamps flickered, casting long shadows on the cracked stone road. Chains rattled with every step the human took. The girl walked beside him silent, her thoughts loud within her. "Why?" she finally whispered, her voice so soft it was almost lost to the wind. The human turned his head, his eyes meeting hers. His gaze was gentle yet strong. "Because no one should be treated like nothing," he said. Simple words, but they carried a weight heavier than the chains he wore. The girl's throat tightened and she looked down at her feet. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. She had been property, a burden, an unwanted thing, but in his voice, she felt something new. Respect, kindness, maybe even hope. The guards pushed them toward a large transport vehicle waiting at the edge of the road. Its metal doors creaked open, revealing rows of prisoners already inside. Humans, aliens, all chained, their faces empty with despair. The human was shoved inside, the chains pulling him down into the dirt. The girl tried to climb in after him, but a guard blocked her. "She belongs to him now," one guard sneered. "Let her follow if she wishes," the others laughed, shaking their heads at the strange bond. Inside the transport, the human sat down against the cold wall. The girl crouched beside him, close enough to feel the heat of his body. For a long moment, silence filled the space, broken only by the sound of the engine rumbling. Other prisoners stared, whispering about the strange pair. "Why would a human do this?" one muttered. "Madness," another said, "but maybe." Courage, the girl hugged her knees, her eyes never leaving his face. He looked tired, but there was no fear in him, only resolve. Like a man who had made a choice and accepted its price. She wanted to ask more questions, but the lump in her throat was too heavy. Instead, she whispered almost to herself, "You should not have done this for me." The human gave a small smile, faint but real. "You are alive," he said. "That is enough." The transport shook as it rolled across the rough road. The prisoners swayed with each turn, chains rattling like a sad song. The night outside stretched on, dark and endless. The girl leaned against the human's shoulder, her eyes closing for a moment. For the first time in her life, she felt safe even in chains. When the transport finally stopped, the doors clanged open. A wave of cold air swept inside, carrying the smell of iron and smoke. They had arrived at the labor camp, the guards shouted, dragging the prisoners out one by one. The human stood, his chains pulling at his wrists. The girl clung to his arm, refusing to let go. The guards laughed again. "Look at her, clinging like a lost child." But the human placed his hand gently on her shoulder, steadying her. "Stay close," he whispered, and she nodded quickly. Together, they stepped into the harsh light of the camp. Fires burned in the distance. Fences of steel and barbed wire surrounded the area. The sound of hammers and shouting filled the night. Everywhere she looked, she saw misery, broken people, and endless work. Her heart pounded in fear, but the human's calm presence gave her strength. The guards led them to a barracks, where they would spend the night before labor began. The other prisoners stared as they entered, their eyes following the strange pair. The human sat down against the wooden wall, chains still locked tight. The girl sat beside him, refusing to move away. For a moment, the noise of the camp faded, and all she could hear was his steady breath. She thought of the words he had spoken. "You are not nothing," they echoed inside her mind, brighter than the fire outside. And though the night was cold and the camp full of despair, for the first time in her life, the alien girl believed that maybe, just maybe, she had worth. The labor camp smelled of smoke, rust, and hopelessness. Prisoners moved like shadows under the watch of guards, their chains dragging on the ground. The human walked among them, heavy iron clamped around his wrists and ankles, but his head was held high. Beside him, the alien girl clung to his arm, refusing to let him vanish into the crowd. The guards jeered at the strange sight. "Look at her," one said, "clinging to a slave as if he were her father." Another laughed. "She is worthless, but she thinks she has found her savior." The words cut, But the human ignored them, his steady gaze fixed forward. His calmness confused the girl, who had always bowed her head when insulted. Yet here was a man mocked and chained, and still he walked like he carried no shame. Work began at dawn. The camp roared with noise as prisoners were forced to haul stones, hammer iron, and dig trenches. The human was pushed into the line, chains biting into his wrists as he lifted heavy rocks. The girl followed him even when guards told her to stay back. She carried small stones in her tiny hands, her eyes fierce though her body was weak. Prisoners whispered about them, some shaking their heads, others smiling faintly. It was unusual to see such loyalty, unusual to see kindness in a place built only for cruelty. That night when the prisoners collapsed into the barracks, broken and exhausted, the human noticed a young alien boy coughing in the corner. His ribs stuck out sharply, his skin bruised. And no one spared him a glance. The human walked over. Breaking a small piece of bread he had been given, he offered it to the boy without hesitation. The alien girl watched, her eyes wide. She whispered, "You are hungry too, why give it away?" The human smiled faintly. "Because he is weaker than me," he said, "and kindness keeps us alive." The boy looked at the human with tears in his eyes, clutching the bread like it was treasure. The girl sat quietly, the human's words sinking into her heart. She had never seen such actions before, never seen someone choose to care for another when survival demanded selfishness. The days turned into weeks. The human worked, always carrying more than his share, always helping others when the guards weren't looking. When someone stumbled under the weight of stone, he lifted it for them. When a prisoner was beaten and left bleeding, he tore a strip of his ragged shirt to bandage the wound. The alien girl stayed by his side, learning from him in silence. She too began to share the little food she had, slipping crumbs to the weakest, guiding the blind, whispering encouragement to those who had forgotten hope. Prisoners began to notice. They whispered about the human and the girl. Some said he was a fool, wasting strength. Others said he was dangerous because kindness breeds courage, and courage sparks rebellion. Yet in the eyes of the broken and the forgotten, a small flame was lit for the first time in years. They saw someone stand not as a slave, but as a man. One evening, a guard noticed the girl refusing to let go of the human's arm. He grabbed her by the hair, pulling her away roughly. "Worthless creature," the guard sneered. "He belongs to us, not you," the girl cried out, struggling against his grip before the guard could strike her. The human stepped forward, chains rattling as he moved between them. His eyes burned not with fear but with fury. "Touch her again and you will regret it," he said. His voice low and sharp. The guard laughed at first, but something in the human's eyes made him hesitate. He shoved the girl back toward the human and spat on the ground. "Not worth the trouble," he muttered, walking away. The girl clung to the human's arm again. Tears streaking her face, she whispered, "Why do you protect me? I am nothing." The human crouched down, meeting her eyes. "You are not nothing," he said firmly. "You are alive. You are free here." He tapped her chest lightly where her heart beat fast. "And that is worth more than chains." Those words carved themselves into her soul. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the barracks. She remembered the auction hall, the laughter, the insults, the human sacrifice. She remembered the way he shared food, the way he shielded her, the way he spoke as if her life had value. Her chest ached, but it was no longer the ache of shame. It was something new, something bright, something she could not yet name. By morning, she made a decision. If he could give up his freedom for her, then she would give her courage for him. If he could stand tall in chains, then she too would rise from the dust. The camp might call her worthless, but by his side, she would prove them wrong. And so, as the sun rose and the guards barked their orders, the alien girl lifted her head high, her small hands steady, her voice unshaken. She walked beside the human not as a burden, not as a slave, but as someone learning what it meant to have worth. The nights in the labor camp were colder than the days. The wind blew through broken walls, carrying the smell of smoke and sweat. Inside the barracks, prisoners huddled close, their whispers floating like ghosts in the dark. It was during these nights that stories began to spread. Stories about the human and the alien girl. Some said he was mad. Only a fool would trade freedom for nothing, they murmured. Others whispered that his madness was bravery, a spark that frightened even the guards, in a place where hope had long died. Even a small act of kindness felt like rebellion. The girl sat close to the human, her thin frame wrapped in an old blanket. She listened as prisoners whispered about him, thinking he could not hear. They called him the man who had bought a soul with chains, the man who gave worth to the worthless. Her chest tightened with strange pride, though she still felt the sting of their words. One evening, a scarred alien prisoner leaned close to another and said, "The guards fear him." The other snorted. "He is chained like the rest of us." But the scarred one shook his head. "Not his body, his spirit. That is what they fear." The human heard all of this but never responded. He worked during the day, he rested during the night, and he never lost his calm. Yet the girl noticed something the others did not. Sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, his eyes grew distant, heavy with hidden sorrow. She wondered what life he had left behind, what dreams he had traded for her freedom. One night she asked him quietly, her voice trembling, "Do you regret it?" The human turned his head, his chains rattling softly. "Regret what?" he asked. "Giving yourself away," she whispered. "For me?" For a long moment he did not answer, his gaze fixed on the flickering torchlight. Then he said simply, "No." The word was quiet, but it carried more weight than a shout. The girl's eyes filled with tears, and she pressed her face into her knees, unsure why her heart hurt so much. As the whispers grew louder in the camp, the guards began to notice. They did not like the way prisoners looked at the human, not with fear, but with respect. One guard muttered to another, "If he keeps this up, they will start believing they have worth," another growled. "We should break him before that happens." The girl overheard these words, and fear filled her chest. She hurried back to the human and clutched his arm tightly. "They want to hurt you," she whispered urgently. "They want to break you." The human looked at her, his calm expression unchanged. "They can break my body," he said, "but not my choice." The girl shook her head, frustrated. She wanted to scream at him, to make him fight, to make him run. But deep inside, she understood his strength was not in escape. It was in standing firm even in chains. That strength terrified the guards and inspired the prisoners. One evening, as the moon rose high and silver over the camp, a group of prisoners gathered in secret. They spoke in hushed voices, planning. "If he can stand up to them, maybe we can too," one said. "We could fight back," another whispered. "We could escape." But others shook their heads, fear in their eyes. "Escape means death," they muttered. "And death is worse than chains." The alien girl sat nearby, listening, her heart racing. For the first time, she saw the ripples of the human sacrifice spreading. He had not only given her worth, he had given others the thought of freedom. Even the idea was dangerous, and she knew the guards would crush it if they could. Later that night, the human noticed her troubled face. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low. "They talk about you," she whispered. "They talk about fighting, escaping because of you." He sighed softly, leaning back against the wooden wall. "I cannot control what they choose," he said, "but I can choose who I am." The girl's small hands tightened into fists. She wanted to be strong like him, unshaken, unbroken. But all she felt was fear still. When she looked into his eyes, she saw no fear there, only steady resolve. And for the first time, she thought maybe she could learn to be like that. As the whispers spread further, so did the danger. The guards began to watch the human more closely. Their eyes sharp and suspicious. Every kind act he gave was seen as defiance. Every word of comfort as rebellion, but still he did not stop. When a prisoner fell under a heavy load, he helped. When someone cried in the dark, he spoke gentle words, and the alien girl stayed at his side, whispering back the same kindness she had learned from him. The camp was filled with whispers now. Whispers of rebellion, whispers of hope, whispers of worth. And in the center of it all, in the cold and dark, stood a chained human and a once worthless girl, together. They were a light the darkness could not easily swallow. The camp was never quiet. Even at night, the sound of chains, coughing, and the distant hammering of iron filled the air. But in the shadows, something else had begun to stir. The whispers that once carried doubt now carried plans. Prisoners gathered in corners, pretending to rest, their lips moving in secret. They spoke of guards' routines, weak spots in the fences, and hidden paths beyond the hills. The alien girl listened, her heart racing. She could not believe what she was hearing. For the first time, the word escape did not sound like a dream. It sounded like a choice. At the center of these whispers stood the human, though he never claimed to lead them. Others looked to him, waiting for his nod, his calm voice, his courage. He always answered the same: "If you want freedom, you must take it together." The girl clung to his side. Torn between fear and hope, she wanted freedom. But she feared losing him even more. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, the humans sat with a small group in the barracks. A scarred prisoner unrolled a piece of cloth on the floor, covered in charcoal markings. "This is the camp," he whispered. "The guards change shifts here and here." 2 hours before dawn, he tapped the drawing, his finger shaking. "If we strike then, we might break through before they can stop us." The human studied the markings carefully, his chains clinking as he moved. "Many will fall," he said quietly. "But if we stand together, some will live." The prisoners nodded grimly, their eyes glowing faintly with hope. The alien girl hugged her knees, staring at the cloth. Every part of her screamed that it was too dangerous, too impossible. But then she remembered the auction hall, his voice saying, "You are not nothing." She bit her lip and whispered, "I will help too." The prisoners looked at her with surprise. Some even laughed. "She is too small," one muttered. "She will only slow us down." But the human shook his head firmly. "She has more courage than most here," he said. "And courage is what we need." The girl's chest swelled with pride. Though her hands still trembled, the days leading up to the plan were filled with tension. The prisoners worked under the watchful eyes of guards, pretending to be broken. But in secret, they sharpened tools, loosened chains, and memorized signals. The alien girl learned to watch for the torchlight patterns of the guards. She memorized the sound of keys on their belts. The moments when they grew careless, every detail mattered. Because one mistake meant death. That night the human sat beside her, speaking softly. "You do not have to do this," he told her. "No one will think less of you." The girl shook her head, her eyes shining in the dim firelight. "You gave up your freedom for me," she whispered. "I will not leave you now." The human placed a hand gently on her shoulder, his voice steady. "Then remember this. Freedom is not given. It is taken, but it is also protected. Protect those around you." She nodded, repeating the words to herself until they carved deep into her heart. When the night of the escape finally came, the camp was cloaked in silence. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, the stars faint and cold. The prisoners moved like shadows, their breaths shallow, their chains muffled with cloth. The human walked in the front, his steps slow but sure. The alien girl clung to his arm, her eyes darting everywhere, every sound making her jump. Then the signal came, a stone striking metal sharp and loud in an instant. The camp exploded with motion. Prisoners surged forward, attacking guards with stolen tools and fists. The night filled with shouts, steel clashing, and the roar of fire. The girl's heart pounded so hard she thought it would burst, but she stayed close to the human. Moving as he moved, fighting as he fought, a guard lunged at her with a whip, and she froze in terror before the strike could land. The human stepped in front of her, the whip cutting across his back. He staggered but did not fall, his hands grabbing the guard's weapon and twisting it away. He struck the guard down with one heavy blow. The girl cried out, "You are hurt," but he only shook his head. "Keep moving," he said, his voice calm even in the chaos. The fences loomed ahead, tall and sharp with barbed wire. Prisoners rushed toward them, some climbing, some tearing at the post with desperate strength. The guards shouted, blowing horns, their boots thundering as reinforcements arrived. The girl felt panic rising in her chest. She pulled at the human's arm, shouting, "We must go now, before it is too late." But the human stopped, turning to face the chaos behind them. More prisoners were falling, beaten back, screaming for help. His eyes burned with resolve. "I will not leave them," he said, his chains rattling as he turned back toward the fight. The girl's tears spilled down her cheeks, her voice breaking. "No, if you stay, they will kill you, please." "We can escape now." He placed his hand on her face, gentle even in the madness. "I gave my freedom for you," he whispered. "Now you must choose yours." She shook her head fiercely, gripping his arm with all her strength. "No," she cried. "I will not leave without you." For the first time, the human's calm broke, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. But then he smiled, faint but proud. "Then we fight together," he said, turning back to face the oncoming storm. The alien girl wiped her tears, her fear burning away. If he could stand against the darkness, then so could she, and so in the middle of the riot, with chains rattling and fire blazing, the human and the girl stood side by side, ready to fight for more than escape. They were ready to fight for each other. The camp was burning, flames licked the wooden fences, Smoke rose into the night and the sound of chains breaking filled the air. The riot had turned into a storm, wild and unstoppable. In the middle of it stood the human, his chains heavy, his back bleeding, but his spirit unbroken. The alien girl stayed close to him, her small hands gripping a broken piece of wood like a weapon. Her chest pounded with fear, but her eyes burned with the same fire she saw in him. Together they moved through the chaos, not running for themselves, but pulling others to their feet. Every time someone stumbled, the human lifted them. Every time a prisoner faltered, the girl urged them forward. The guards fought back with whips and blades, shouting curses, but for the first time they were outnumbered. The prisoners, once silent and broken, roared with rage. They fought not only for escape, but because one man in chains had shown them their worth. The human's body was battered, but he never slowed. He caught the arm of a guard about to strike a boy, twisted it, and threw the man to the ground. The girl pulled the boy away, whispering, "Run! Keep running." Her voice, once weak, now carried strength. More and more prisoners surrounded them, shouting his name. "Human, human," they cried, as if he was already a legend. The guards' faces twisted with fear, their control slipping, and the human's calm voice cut through the chaos. "Together," he said. "Fight together. Live together." The alien girl felt pride swell in her chest. This was no longer the man who had quietly traded freedom in an empty hall. This was a leader, a light in the darkness, and she was no longer a worthless child. She was part of his fight. They reached the fence where barbed wire gleamed in the firelight. Prisoners were already tearing it down with bloody hands. Some climbing, some pulling, but more guards rushed in, horns blaring, weapons flashing. The path to freedom was closing fast. The human grabbed the wire with his chained hands. Ignoring the cuts it left, he pulled with all his strength. Muscles straining, others rushed to help him, the fence bending under their combined force. The alien girl pressed her small body against the wire too, pushing and pulling. Her hands bled, but she did not stop. At last the fence broke. Crashing down into the dust, a roar rose from the prisoners as they surged forward, pouring into the open land beyond. But the human did not move. He stood at the broken edge, holding the line as guards charged in with fury. The alien girl screamed, "Come, we must go," tugging at his arm. But he shook his head, his voice steady. "Not yet. They need more time." He stepped forward, blocking the path of the guards, chains clattering like war drums. The prisoners who had followed him hesitated, torn between running and staying. Then one by one they turned back, standing beside him. The scarred alien, the coughing boy, the weak and the forgotten, each took their place. The guards stopped in shock, their faces pale as the prisoners formed a wall of defiance. The human raised his chained hands, his voice loud. "You think chains make us weak," he shouted, "but they bind us together. And together we are stronger than you." A cheer erupted, the sound shaking the very ground. The guards charged, but the wall of prisoners held, fighting with fists, stones, and fire. The alien girl stayed at his side, striking with her small piece of wood. Fear still lived in her heart, but it no longer controlled her. She remembered his words, "You are not nothing," and with every strike, every shout, she proved it true. The battle raged until the guards broke. Seeing their power crumble, they fled toward the far gates. Shouting for reinforcements, the camp was theirs. The prisoners roared in victory, some collapsing in tears, others hugging each other like lost family. The human fell to one knee, his body trembling, his wounds deep. The alien girl dropped beside him, tears spilling down her face. "You cannot fall now," she begged, holding his shoulders, but he smiled faintly, his breath heavy. "I am not falling," he whispered. "I am free." The prisoners gathered around them, their eyes full of awe and gratitude. One by one, they broke the chains from his wrists, snapping the locks with stolen tools. The sound of the iron falling to the ground echoed like thunder. The alien girl touched his free hands with trembling fingers. For the first time she saw him without chains, and her heart swelled with joy. The scarred alien stepped forward, his voice rough but firm. "You gave us hope," he said. "Now we will follow you. Wherever you go." Others nodded, their voices rising. They were no longer slaves. They were free because of him. But the human shook his head, his voice steady even in pain. "Do not follow me," he said. "Follow your own freedom, live it, protect it. Never let it be taken again." The alien girl leaned close, whispering so only he could hear. "They call you a leader now," she said softly. "But to me you are more than that." He looked at her. his eyes tired but kind. "And what am I to you?" he asked. She held his hand tightly, her voice trembling but sure. "You are my worth," she whispered. "The proof that I matter." The human's faint smile grew stronger. "And you are mine," he said. "The proof that freedom is worth more than chains." The smoke of the broken camp still lingered in the sky. The fires burned low, casting strange light across the ruins of fences and towers. Prisoners who had once walked with heads bowed now stood tall, their chains lying broken in the dirt for the first time in many years. The night carried not cries of despair, but voices of freedom. The human sat by the collapsed fence, his back against a charred post. His body was weak, his wounds deep, but his spirit was steady. The alien girl knelt beside him, pressing a rag against the cut on his arm. Her hands trembled, but her eyes shone with fierce determination. "You must not fall now," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He looked at her, tired but calm, and said, "I will not. Not while you stand beside me." Around them, former prisoners gathered in groups, some laughing, some crying, some staring at the open horizon as if they had never seen it before. They spoke in low voices of where they would go, of families long lost, of worlds beyond the stars. The scarred alien, who had once whispered doubt, now raised his head proudly. "We are no longer slaves," he said, his voice echoing in the night. "We are free people, because one man reminded us who we are." The human shook his head slowly, his voice carrying across the crowd. "You are free because you chose to fight," he said. "Not because of me, but because of yourselves." The words spread through the people, heavier than iron, lighter than air. The alien girl listened, her chest full, her heart racing. For the first time she saw herself not as a burden, but as part of something greater. Dawn began to creep over the horizon, painting the sky with silver and gold. The camp looked different in the light of morning, broken yet beautiful. The guards had fled, their weapons abandoned, their power shattered. The prisoners, no. The free people, stood at the edge of the open land, waiting for a direction, waiting for hope. The human rose slowly, leaning on the alien girl for support. His chains were gone, but his body still bore their marks. Red and raw, he faced the crowd, his voice quiet but strong. "You have your freedom," he said. "Do not waste it, do not give it away. Build something better than this." The people murmured, nodding, their eyes shining with belief. The alien girl tugged at his sleeve, whispering, "Where will we go?" He looked down at her, his gaze gentle. "Wherever the stars will take us," he said. "Freedom is not a place. It is a path we walk together." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of hope, of belonging, of something she had never known before. She took his hand, small and fragile in his, and said, "Then I will walk that path with you always." The crowd began to move, some heading toward the mountains, some toward the forest, each finding their own road, but many lingered. Looking back at the human and the girl, they wanted to follow, to stay near the man who had shown them their worth. But his words still rang in their minds, "Do not follow me. Follow your own freedom." So they left, carrying his strength with them, carrying the spark he had lit as the sun rose higher. The human and the girl walked beyond the broken fence. The land stretched wide before them, endless and waiting. The air smelled different here, fresh and open, no longer poisoned by smoke and fear. The girl breathed deeply, her chest full of life. She whispered, "It feels strange, this freedom." The human nodded. It always does at first. They walked together, their steps slow but steady. Behind them lay ruins. Ahead of them lay the unknown. But for the first time, the unknown did not frighten them. It called to them like a promise, like a song that night under a sky full of stars. They rested on a hill beyond the camp. The girl lay beside the human, her head against his shoulder. She stared up at the stars, her voice soft. "They once told me I was worth nothing," she whispered. "But now I know they were wrong." The human turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers. "You are worth everything," he said. His voice sure, she smiled, closing her eyes, letting his words sink deep into her soul. The stars above seemed brighter, the night less cold. Together, they were no longer a slave and a stranger. They were companions, family, bound not by chains but by choice. The legend of the human who gave his freedom spread far beyond the camp. Across towns, across planets, across the stars, they spoke of the alien girl once sold for nothing. Now walking proudly beside him, they spoke of how kindness had broken chains, how sacrifice had lit a fire no darkness could put out. And though the stories grew and changed with each telling, one truth never faded: that freedom, when shared, is stronger than iron, brighter than flame, and worth more than life itself. And so the human and the alien girl walked on into the endless horizon, carrying not just their own freedom but the hope of many.